Okay, so we're going to start drawing the basic proportions of the head. Started it before, but I wanted to kind of go back and go over a couple of other details. Okay, so again, first thing you're going to do is start by drawing a box that will frame the general shape of the head. And how we do that is we actually use the measurement of the eye. And so once we determine how big we want the eye to be, then we'll use that to kind of get the general proportions of the head. Got a line up here. I'm going to score it a little bit longer. This is basically, if we take a measurement of the eye, we're looking at sort of a measurement that goes from one side of the eye to the other, like that. Okay, a little eye in there. Okay, so we take that measurement. So that's roughly how big the eye is going to be in this. And what we do is we hold our pencil out to take that measurement. If we want to do it like in actual space, in terms of like a one-to-one scale, when we've got somebody as a subject, we can hold our pencil out and do the sight measurement like we've done before in the class, measure the person's eye from the distance we're at, and then we can draw that exactly onto the page, the same scale. We can double, triple, or quadruple it if we want to make it bigger. But we're going to just choose a size for today's breakdown. Okay, so we've decided that this is going to be the size of the eye. So once we have that measurement, we create a box that is 5 eyes across by 7 eyes down. And basically I take this measurement of the eye, and then I can go across the page and then just get my marks in there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so 5 spaces. Okay, and then I'll take that measurement, I'll turn it over sideways, and I'll go down. Let's do it over here. A little bit more, a little less awkward. Okay, let's do it this way. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 eyes down. So 5 eyes across, 7 eyes down. 5 across, 7 down. Okay, I'm going to just make the box based on those proportions. So I've got a ruler to make it a little more precise, a little quicker. Just going to darken it down here. So we get this rectangular box. Put the increments in here. Okay, top and bottom, left and right. I've pre-marked some of these so that I can do it more quickly. All right, so we have this box 5 by 7. Basically what we do at first, we take 1 eye length off the top of the box. And then we have 6 eyes left. We break the box into thirds of 2 eyes each. I want to get in here so I can put a little pressure on it and keep it straight. It gives us our basic breakdown of where the head should fit. And to draw the head, I'm going to break it down a little bit further and actually make the lines a little bit lighter so I have the full kind of grid here. So we'll go up a little bit. This one a little lighter. I'm going to drop these down this way. You guys have been working with a grid this semester. You've used it a bunch of times. So it's nothing new to you. In this grid, you'll see there's a diagram that goes along with this that matches this for the most part. So everything fits in between there pretty nicely. Okay, so basically what we're looking at when we're looking at the human form, we start off looking at the skull. And the skull is basically, we look at the round, the oval of the skull towards the back is kind of this shape here. And then the oval of the face, looking straight at it, is something like this shape here. Okay, and those two shapes put together, for the most part, are how we orient the front of the frontal view. If we look at it from the back, basically we're looking at the skull. We have this kind of oval here, with this kind of oval here, and then the jawbone kind of comes back like that. So we have the skull, and then the eyes are recessed like this. The nasal cavity comes in, the mouth protrudes forward, and the chin bone comes up, something like that. But essentially what you have is you have two ovals put together. Okay, so what we're going to look at here is how these ovals exist in this particular rectangle that we have. And it's basically that big oval of the back. It kind of comes across like this, and it's going to come right down. So we have these thirds here, these zones. Going to come right down to the bottom of this. Sort of a rounded shape up here. Okay, you can see it peaks in the center. Now this is a general, geometric shape of the back of the skull. It's more organic than that. So there are some flat spots and some different plane shifts. And I'll get in front of it in a minute and straighten it out. Okay, so we have this. This is what we're seeing here. We put sort of the face is a little bit smaller. It actually comes almost into about this point here and stops up here, then comes down to the bottom. So you have an oval that roughly fits within this area here. Now, of course, the body is a little more complex than that, but the basic shapes are like that. What you have is that the chin will flare out, and as the chin goes back into this, if we're looking at it from the front, the chin is narrow, but flares back out before it goes up into the skull. And so it opens up a little bit. What you have is it opening up back here, flattening or planing back into that larger part of the skull at the back. Okay. Still working. Okay, I'm going to straighten this out for a second. Sit right in front of it. A little bit easier. Now, the one thing, by sitting in front of it without having it at an angle, now if using the grid, I can use these negative spaces here and here to kind of gauge my circle. I'm also going to have the center line right down the middle of the form, just like you've had in almost everything that you've done this semester. You should have it in everything you've done. You should find the center line of whatever object that you're drawing, and the head is no different. Again, looking at it from straight on, that line's going to come straight down in front of it. Straighten it a little bit. I don't need most of these lines. In the end, these can all disappear underneath the surface. They're just to explain how it's put together right now, and then they'll just become part of the form. So I just want to get this a little bit more evened out. remember again from the whole from using the grid, we're looking at this line here. We want to see if it's matching. Go over to this side and we see, does it intersect at the same spots in this particular square? And if we've drawn our grid correctly, then we know the answer to that just by looking. So it's a great technique for working with any symmetrical object, is having some level or some degree of a grid involved in the construction of the object. Were you to make an actual object, a physical object, you would have to have a grid. That would be, it would start here in terms of understanding how to lay out the materials to construct the object. Okay. All right. Okay. So once we've got this here, I'm just going to make this a little bit more. That looks like there. So when we're looking at this, these two ovals coming together to create the overall structure of the face, basically what we're looking at is when we get from this is sort of the front part of the face in the foreground, it's coming forward, this part slopes back. Okay, so we're looking at these two ovals, this part comes forward, that part slopes back. Okay, the next step we want to look at is if we have these ovals that make up a larger oval, the overall shape of the head, where do the features exist in? And that's why we create these zones. So again, we take the first eye off the top, okay, and then we have the rest in thirds that are 2 eyes each. So we have from here across there, from here across there, from here across there. So we have thirds. Okay, when we're looking at where the features exist in, if we look at this eye and this top third, for the most part, it's all top of the head. This hairline goes somewhere within this area here. Okay. But when we get down into this area, this is all forehead in here. See the big round sort of ball shape of the forehead that exists in there. You get the top of the brows essentially in that third. When we go down to this next third, this is where pretty much where it all happens. So the eyes are located in here, and the nose and goes right down to the tip of the nose, and the tip of the nose basically ends up right there, and then is about an eye width thick. Okay, so that's kind of how those circles go together and how you can judge them. Most diagrams of the head, you're going to find that circle comes right down into the nose. And it's going to vary whether the person's head is a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. These are kind of general, universal measurements, but they're not exact, and they're going to vary with each individual person. Okay, but what we have in this third here is we have the eyes. When you're looking at the eyes, we use that eye as a measurement. We take one eye in from the side, and then basically the eye, like a little ping pong ball, exists within that next third. We have one eye width in between where the bridge of the nose goes. And then we have another eye, again, this sort of rounded shape in here. And then one more eye out to the side of the head. Now, it's a little bit deceiving. What happens with a lot of people is when they draw a face, they draw the eyes too far up to the side of the head. And that's partially because when you kind of put your hand on the ridge of your eye here and look at it, it feels it's right next to your eyeball. But what happens is this bone that makes up, and you'd see it on a skull, and it's sort of like that kind of thing. This bone here is really right beside your eye. And you'll see it's not a very obvious part when you're drawing it because it's a very soft overlap and it's really more of a shadow that creates the line. But then it planes back. So what you're looking at from here to here is basically the distance from the eye here back to the back of the head, to this point here in the skull. So it's a foreshortened distance that you're looking at. So we kind of think that our eyes are right at the side of our skull. Yes, they're at the side of the face, but they're not at the side, the absolute side of the back part of the skull, which is wider. And so that's sort of an illusion. Okay, so that's why that happens. We don't tend to think that we need a whole eye in between. the two eyes, but actually the nose, when we look at the nose does actually comes up, flattens out, and then goes down, and then also planes into the cheekbones. So it actually takes a fair bit of space to do that. The ridge of the nose comes through here, something like that, opens up into the brow bone, and starts to plane down into the face, all in this region. Okay, and we'll get to the breakdown of the nose in a little while. Okay. So that's the second third here, eyes, nose. Also, if we go straight out from the top of the eyes to the outside of the feature, we will tend to see that's where the ears are. And for the most part, if the head is tipped straight towards you, the ears will end up lining up pretty well with the top of the eyes and the nose. Again, we'll get into those a little bit later. Now that's an important thing to note, because like again, most everything happens along this third. And when people are drawing the head, this is one of the most common mistakes that will happen, is when you want to tip the head forward to make it look like the head is looking down. People tend to think about, okay, we'll turn this ball and the features will drop down. And so the eyes will look lower, the nose might come down to here. But when they go up, they do the reverse, put the features up. But what happens is they leave the ears in the same spot. And really, if you look at the eyes coming back, say this is the eye here, coming back, the ears in around here. Okay, it's this straight line. When you turn the skull over and you're kind of looking maybe in a downward position, like this, and the eyes are going this way, that puts the ears up here. And if you're looking at this, what you're seeing is the eyes down low, the ears up high. When the head turns the other way, ears drop down low, eyes go up high. So the relationship between the eyes and the ears is key in making the tilt of the head look correct. If you're looking straight at the head, then the ears should be lined up with the eyes and the bottom of the nose, in most people. All right. When we get down to the mouth area here, so the last third of it is mouth and chin. And there's some features that are consistent throughout the face that we'll kind of get into in a little while once we lay out the basic schematics. Okay, so basically what we have is we look down to about 2/3 of the way down. This square is going to be the split in the mouth, and it's going to look something like this. And we'll get into the specifics of it in a while. Then we have the bottom lip here. We go down to this, we go about 1/3 of the way down into the chin. We're going to have the ball of the chin, so we're going to have a ball-like shape in there, and I'll explain that a little bit more as I break down the rest of this. Okay. So that's the basic placement of the features. So again, break it down, 7 squares down, take one eye off the top. 2 eyes is mostly the forehead and the eyebrows, brow bone in that area. The next third is the eyes down to the bottom of the nose, that lines up with the ears. The last third is the mouth and chin bone. Okay, before I go on too much further, I just want to point out a few of the spherical shapes that are in the head. You can see we're making it up with 2 large spheres to begin with. This is important because in the end you do have this sort of egg shape, and when your light is being cast on it coming from one particular direction and creating the illuminated areas and the cast shadows, it's very important you kind of get that overall shape, you maintain that. What happens is a lot of times people will shade the parts independently without thinking of them as that whole overall shape, and so it's really a sort of an assemblage of parts, and you don't get the whole thing working harmoniously to create that illusion. So when drawing the face, you can see some of the rounded shapes. We use 2 large rounded shapes to kind of create the overall sense of the head. If you're looking in the forehead here, we have this rounded shape in the forehead, rounded shapes for the eyeballs. In the nose, we're going to have the tip of the nose is a somewhat rounded shape in here, and we have the rounded shapes of the nostrils on either side. When we go down into the lips, the tip of the lip is basically broken into 3 rounded shapes. You have the tip of the lip here that comes forward. Behind that, you have another rounded shape on either side of that. Okay, when we go down to the split of the bottom lip, basically it breaks into 2 rounded shapes. So we have other rounded shapes like this. As we go down into the chin, while it appears to be one single ball, there's a piece of cartilage that goes right down in the middle, and we have oval shapes on either side of that. We'll explain those as I get in there to flesh them out a little bit. Okay, as we go to the corners of the mouth, where the split of the mouth kind of goes back in and the skin turns around, basically where the split of the mouth ends, you have 2 little rounded shapes of elastic muscular tissue in there. Okay. All right, you have muscles in here that come down from underneath the lips, and then again, somewhat rounded shapes in there. Okay. The cheekbones themselves. Okay. And if you actually get up into the forehead, it is a rounded shape, but it has a flattened spot in the center of it there, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go forward. Get to the bottoms of the ears, the rounded shapes of the lobes in the ears, and so on. So there's a lot of rounded shapes is what it comes down to. But it's important to understand, because what you're dealing with to make this look realistic is how light and shadow, or how light responds when it hits one of these rounded shapes. And part of what's going on is we've dealt with just a simple sphere, light and shadow on a sphere. And we know that if we have a sphere, basically like this, and we have a directional light, we'll say directional light coming from here. Basically we have light on one side of the sphere, shadow on the other. It follows a round arc of the sphere. In between the light and shadow, we have a core shadow. Okay, in the lit area, we'll probably have a little bright bit of a highlight where it's lit, core shadow, and then in the actual sphere itself, we'll have a little bit of reflected light off of whatever surface it's sitting on. We might have a couple of those spots that lighten up on the underside of the object. The cast shadow from there, again, right where it makes contact, you should have a nice dark shadow, nice crisp and clear, and as the shadow, as the light goes out, that defines the parameters of the shadow. You have the shadow breaking down into about 3 distinct values, nice dark underneath the object as it comes out from the cast shadow of the object. You have another value, and then as you get out towards the edges, depending on how far out or how long that shadow is, it will soften again. And you'll probably have some light bouncing around on the object, so you might have a little reflected light somewhere in the shadow as well. Okay, so then that has to happen on each and every one of these little objects in there. They're not full spheres, but they do have the rounded shapes associated with that. Pyramidal shapes of the nose and so on. So to make it look right, you have to understand how the light and shadow responds on these areas. Where people tend to fall down is that they get involved in the specific areas here, and they deal with it as a separate form from the form next to it. And you have to remember that these are all existing on a larger oval form. So it's important that if the light's coming from here, from this direction on this side, that we're going to have shadow coming down the form on this whole side of this overall shape. Before we even get into the distinct shadows on the littler objects. So we kind of overall get that overall sense of light and shadow first.